We made this.
Hello and welcome to We Buy Records. I'm Paul Field and I'm joined as ever by the lovely Mr. Tim Scullion. Hello, Tim.
Hiya.
Summer special.
Yes, it's technically summer, as we've had quite a lot of rain, but it is the summer and we are special. So this is the summer special. All it really means is probably one more interview than you'd normally get, and it's a bit longer. Summer special.
Basically that, yes, because we like to have a little break in the summer, so we rip up all the hard work and then just speak to other people.
Exactly, and you'll be getting a summer special part 2 reasonably soon. Then
yes.
We'll have a little break, and then we'll be back as if nothing had happened.
Correct. And then if anyone sends us a message saying when's the next episode, we'll just ignore it.
Paul, have we got any housekeeping?
We do. A big, lovely shout out to our supporters who have bought us a coffee this month. Big shout out to Cheap Indie Vinyl, to Mark Walters, to Joel from Brighter Day, who we'll be hearing from later in the show, and a big shout out to Brendan, who says, love the podcast, keep it up.
Thank you also very much to Rachel Blackman, to Anonymous, to Colin McQueen, and to Tom Berry, who says simply, in it bras. Thank you, everybody. You can, if you want to support the pod and its running costs, support us on Coffee. You just go to
www.ko-fi.com/We Buy Records.
It's just as simple as that. And you can sling us a couple of quid if you like what we do. But as always, you are absolutely not obliged to. You can just keep enjoying us for free, and that's fine too.
Should we do the news?
Definitely. Now, Paul, today's news is local to us, is us news.
Hurrah!
News that is only of interest to a reasonably small corner of the United Kingdom. But local news is still news.
Correct.
So, Paul, what's coming up in a couple of weeks?
So, Saturday the 14th of August from 10 a.m, although obviously that's when the amateurs turn up, the pros will be there sort of, a good 30, 40 minutes before then. It's the Bexhill Record Fair at the Delaware Pavilion in Bexhill, which is a beautiful Art Deco building with lovely views across the sea. Now, last time, this was pretty big because they filled the main auditorium and both of the sort of wings down the side, the raised section. So it was pretty bustling. And, of course, lovely Del from Music's Not Dead had his shop set up as well. And he had a fantastic day. So is it worth people travelling from outside the area to come to this, Tim?
Yes, I think it is. It really was great last time. There were really good DJs. There's lots of nice eateries and bars in the local area, so you can make a nice day of it. The guy that organises it, John, is a genuine delight. Lovely guy, and his stall is always worth a visit because his prices are super fair, and he's quite nice and choosy about what he stocks. So even if just for him and us, yes, that's right, listeners, me and Paul will be there hawking some wares. So you're welcome to come and try your hand at haggling with me. Just FYI, you will succeed.
Oh, definitely. If I spot anyone not haggling with you, I will step in and haggle on their behalf, Tim.
But no, it's going to be really good. And, I think that's it for news because it's a summer special. We're keeping it light and frothy.
Yep.
That's your news. Normally we would lead with some kind of Brexit tale of awfulness. But no, it's just me and Paul are going to be selling at a record fair in Bexhill in a couple of Saturdays' time. And it's going to be really fun.
Tim, it's time for lovely Gareth from Clash magazine. Now, normally he just gives us a data blast of new releases.
The man's a machine.
But we got to have a little nose into his collection after the data blast, and he told us about some of his lovely fancy bits.
Yeah, stick around for that. There's one in particular which is pretty incredible. But yes, as always, we started by asking Gareth to look through some new releases.
Right then, let's get into it. New-wise, it's a little bit quiet because it's that time of year through the summer. Everyone's kind of done their big releases. We're gearing up for kind of greatest hits season, which will come around. But one artist decided to get in early on the sort of best of front, and Noel Gallagher's High Flying Birds. His volume 1 of Back the Way We Came was out in the last month or so. They did a record store day version which involved a different colour to the other coloured versions, which somehow warranted an extra £10. For the purposes of this, just looked at the standard black vinyl edition, 2 LPs. There is a 4 LP edition if you are somebody who wants a very strange selection of bonus tracks on vinyl for no obvious discernible reason. The standard 2 LP set does a decent job. You know, I mean, everyone knows what Gallagher's done in the last 10 years in terms of his solo stuff. The first couple of years, it was very much kind of carrying on the Oasis way, and then he suddenly discovered disco and started having a bit of fun. This is spread over 4 sides. Pressed at TAC, who I've mentioned before, this plant in Poland, they really are picking up a lot of business recently, so I can only assume they were the only remaining plant that had any capacity as things went crazy in recent months. The downside to it is, in many ways, what's happening to them is exactly what's happened to all the other sort of pressing plants in the last few months. So a few of their things that have come through recently, I know people had trouble with the Nick Cave Carnage pressing recently as well, which was done through them. They've just got a little bit of noise on the run-in. I presume it's some specific thing about the way they're manufacturing their records at the moment. So a little bit of noise. The sleeve looks great because it's based on an old 60s Bee Gees compilation. As ever with Gallagher, you know, the interviews are generally more interesting than the songs, but if that's the sort of thing that you're after, then it's been done reasonably well, priced reasonably sensibly, and it sounds reasonably good. So I think all in all, reasonable. Giselle Smith, a soul singer on a label called Jalapeno Records. It was one of these things that got sent to me as part of the sort of review pile of things to speculatively listen to. Her third album, Revealing's, come out recently. It's a sort of really heavy soul record. It's influenced by sort of early 70s soul, so it's got lovely sense of some of the more experimental Stevie Wonder kind of instrumentation, tremendous vocal sound to it. She scrapped one album after having a pretty torrid time emotionally and just went off to New York and rewrote things from scratch, and it's a really genuinely interesting soul record. The production is okay. The digital version sounds quite thin and timid, and then I was intrigued to see if that was because it was done for vinyl, but then the vinyl edition is a slightly weird sort of direct DMM cut for abbreviation's sake, done through Optimal, and it's one of those where you can really tell it's digital on vinyl, where you almost, if you picture a rectangle in the soundstage right in front of you when you're listening, nothing above, nothing below, slightly fat bass sound to it. Good music, slightly dubious pressing. Gaspard Auger, I've no idea if I'm saying that right, but he was one of Justice, tremendous sort of like noughties and teens French dance act, has done a solo record called Escapades. It's been done through MPO in France, as is so often the case with that particular scene. It's a good cut. It largely plays back silently. The tiny little bit of surface noise here and there, slightly compromised on the top end, could be a little bit open, as is sometimes the case with dance music. It's a sort of prog house record. I mean, it sounds not necessarily appealing from that particular genre description, but it's really good fun. And I don't mean that in a patronising way. I mean, genuinely, if you're looking for a summer record, something to shove on when you're going for a long drive, or something to soundtrack sitting around lazily in the garden, it's something like that will really capture the imagination. It is crying out, I think, for some sort of dramatic sports montage to soundtrack as it just builds and builds and builds. But it's good fun. It's good fun. And Cedric Burnside is something new to me. He's a sort of tremendous country blues singer that's been pressed by a label that I'd never heard of before called Single Lock, who are based in New Orleans and Muscle Shoals. And they've started doing these really deluxe gatefold pressings, stout and tip-on sleeves, all the things that get record collectors excited. Pressed through RTI, one of those sort of inner sleeves, the see-through plastic sleeves rather than the paper ones. So all sort of pressed with care. It's a reasonably quiet pressing. It could be a little bit quieter, to be honest, but it sounds great. And that sort of, when you've got a really sort of rich country blues sound where you want the soundstage to pull out of the speakers and for the bass to be nice and tight so that you can really feel the sound of those instruments being played. It's got all of that. He's the grandson of R.L. Burnside and covers one of his songs on there, so it's an interesting listen. It's something a little bit different from a label that I've not heard of previously. So, yeah, an intriguing range of new stuff this month.
And what's going on in reissue land? Always a treat, this.
Well, we'll begin as ever with PJ Harvey, who gets a sort of almost every month gets a slot. White Chalk is the latest of hers to be reissued. The good news for people who experienced the original 2007 pressing, it is still 45 RPM, which was how it was cut originally, because it's only just over half an hour long. However, the original was back in the dark days of when GZ were at their very worst, like funny looking coloured vinyl, just pops all over the place. It was a disaster zone originally because it's quite a quiet record. It's the one where PJ Harvey did a slightly different voice. It's a slightly more high-pitched voice, which is quite notorious amongst her fans. Split opinion somewhat, but I think it's a genuinely very interesting and occasionally haunting record. They've now kept it 45, but done it all through Optimal. Beautiful, replica sleeves, all sorts of stuff. It's righted the wrongs of 14 years ago. So if you've been waiting for that one, crack on. Joni Mitchell, the archive stuff that started last year with lots of demos and early bits and bobs. Alongside that, they're reissuing the original album. So the first box set of the reprise album, 68 to 71, which is Song to a Seagull, Clouds, Ladies of the Canyon, and Blue. They're all now back out. They've been done as, again, these hard tip-on gatefold sleeves. Fresh remaster done by Bernie Grunman, another big name in terms of your vinyl cutting. European editions have been done through Optimal, and they sound pretty good. My understanding is that if you buy an American copy, you'll get it pressed at RTI, and the word on the street tells me that it's probably better to go that way. But of course, if you're bringing it in from America, God knows what other costs you'll incur as a result of that. Overall, the sound is pretty good. Song to a Seagull's been remastered because Joni Mitchell herself wasn't happy with the original sound of it. Unfortunately, it's one of those that's had a sort of 21st century remaster that sort of sucks all of the air out of the room. So while things are clearer, there's none of that kind of natural studio hiss and the sound that really, if you're listening to a record from over 50 years ago, you would probably expect to be there. So it's a curious one. The rest of them all sound very good. The slightly brighter end of things and slightly more forward than some of the more audiophile reissues that those albums have had. But I mean, the major issue is going to be the fact that it's over 100 quid for 4 LPs in a box that have been out for a very long time. If you were buying them as audiophile reissues, they'd probably be 30 quid a pop, which would take you to 120. But if you've got issues with them, the sound's not necessarily perfect. A couple of the discs are suffering from non-fill, the sort of ripping noise where it's not been pressed perfectly. Is it worth that kind of money? Probably not. Is it the sort of thing that will probably end up in some sort of discount in a few months' time? Yes. So if you're tempted, I'd wait. Spiritualized, we've mentioned the first of their reissue program previously. They got around to Pure Phase this time. Laser Guided Melodies, they cocked up the sleeve. They did it. It was some sort of weird thin card that bowed and nobody could get it to settle properly, seemed to warp the discs. This time around, they've gone with a much harder sort of Stoughton tip-on, as we've mentioned a few times already, gatefold. It's a better sleeve. It's a little bit small, so the records don't fit in perfectly. It's a GZ press, largely quiet. I think you're playing sort of GZ roulette a little bit, because I know a few people have had a few issues with the odd track here and there. Sound quality, I'd say, is pretty much on a par with an original, having done a shootout. Tracks have been moved around, though, curiously, presumably for sound quality reasons, but, I'm never quite sure about that. If you're doing a reissue program, they've already tinkered with the artwork. Do they need to move the songs around as well? If you are a risk taker, then there is a glow-in-the-dark version out there. Most copies have sold out because, as we've established before, lots of people like to look at records rather than play them, but if you do fancy it, there are still a few knocking around. You go at your own peril. Trojan, the label, those of us that have ever had the pleasure of buying those little 3 CD box sets down the years that always used to be knocking around in the original version of FOP for like £7, and this entry into an incredible world. One of the most sort of important compilations for the Trojan label, was the Trojan Story some years ago, and that's been redone as a 50th anniversary set. And there's a CD version, but for vinyl, they've done a 12x12 hardback book. Loads of fresh sleeve notes have been put in there by Rusty Zinn. You've got label manager Bob Bell's written a massive introduction, 3 LPs dotted throughout the book, pressed at GZ, done in special kind of polybag sleeves, and then tucked in slightly so that they don't damage the book when they're being shipped. So it's been really considerately put together. It's not perfectly silent vinyl, but to be honest, with a lot of those Trojan recordings, it doesn't make a huge amount of difference if you've got pristine or not sound quality. It's a good bit of fun, and if that's your sort of interest, then I would heartily recommend that. The Fall, their reissue campaign, sort of several labels seem to be reissuing Fall records at any given time. RUR Missing Winner from 2001 2001 was one of their albums that they ran out of money. Marky Smith had fired the band again, so he was starting again with about lineup 17. They were trying to put this album together from scratch, and as a result of that, they ran out of cash before the record was properly finished. So they ended up releasing an album in 2001 that wasn't mastered. So if you played the original, the volume levels were all over the place, and the original vinyl pressing was a picture disc. So let's take an unmastered album and shove it on a 2001 picture disc. Yes, folks, what a treat. The label Cherry Red have been reissuing full stuff over the last few years, and so they've put this one out. It's done through Tact, but to my ears, the copy I tried was absolutely silent across 4 sides of split-coloured vinyl. No idea how they pulled that off, but if that's your sort of thing and you did like that album, and it's a real kind of like rockabilly thing, Peel loved it, understandably, but if that does appeal to you, then that's been done really, really well. And finally, on the reissue front, this is technically a Record Store Day reissue, but having checked, it's pretty much available everywhere still now. It's one of those that about 5 people will have known what it was when they saw it in the racks, but I'd heartily recommend it. It's an album called Dance by Kamal Abdul Alim, and it came out towards the end of the 80s. It's a sort of soul, jazz funk crossover thing that was perhaps a few years ahead of its time in some respects. It certainly doesn't sound like a late 80s record. There's no Stock Aitken and Waterman on this. Soul Brother have picked this up, the Soul record label and shop. They've pressed it through Tact. It plays absolutely silently. It's a really nice wide sound stage. A little bit sort of lacking the top end, but one suspects that's probably how it was recorded. James Spalding on it, Idris Muhammad on it. If it's something that you've never heard of before and you're thinking, do I take the risk on this? Try the track Brotherhood, which will just blow you away. 7-minute thing. It'll just really get you in the zone for that. And like I said, pretty much every copy that any record shop seems to have bought for Record Store Day is still available now. So treat yourself, or indeed hang on a few months until it's inevitably in one of those strange half-price sales that they do.
Now, I ask you this every time we do this, and every time the answer's yes. Who's on the naughty step, Gareth?
Well, indeed, there is somebody this month. It's a shame as well, because this album is incredible. Boy from Michigan is the latest John Grant record, and his music over the last 11 years has gone on such a sort of transformative journey, having left behind an indie band, The Cells, that he was in before, and then he started off with this sort of 70s American rock radio sound with Queen of Denmark, and then gradually added the electronica. In many ways, he went too far with that on his last record, but with his latest one, he seems to have found this perfect mix, and it is, really genuinely a fantastic album, one of the best things I've heard this year. So at that point, you're thinking, well, obviously, I want to make sure I've got a really good copy of this one. And they've done multiple vinyl editions. There was a 50 quid something sort of O-card edition. There's a deluxe box edition for 100 quid. Do any of these editions have extra tracks? Of course they don't. And there is a standard edition for about 25 quid. And as far as I can tell, all the vinyl editions are the same, which is 240 gram, no problem with that, doesn't need to be 180, all this kind of nonsense. 240 gram discs, pressed through GZ, incredibly noisy, seemingly warped. Several people have reported getting the same disc twice rather than the first and the second disc. I've tried 3 or 4 copies. Every time I put the thing down, it's either too noisy, too warped, or too noisy and too warped. It's such a shame. And it's particularly annoying when you've got an album where they're clearly looking to make a fair bit of cash by doing 27 versions, and yet they haven't got the fundamentals right. And Bella Union are normally really good at this sort of stuff. So bit of a frustration, really, because, the label themselves are good guys, but that actual product is a real frustration.
Now, I know a lot of our listeners do take you up on your what we've got next, your pick of the pops, and hand over their hard-earned. So what are they going to be spending it on this month, Gareth?
Well, in an unusual turn of events, it's the second month running for some jazz. I am absolutely just raving about this particular reissue program to anybody who'll listen at the moment. There's a concept called the British Jazz Explosion that's being done through Universal, sort of through the Decca arm of things, and they are dusting off masters of 60s, 70s British jazz. It started with a Tubby Hayes set that was put out a couple of years ago. A small number of people have picked it up, but those that have got it know it is something pretty special. But as part of that, Tony Higgins, who's been compiling and putting all of this together, he came up with this concept some years ago, but it's taken them a while to get it to fruition. He was involved with some Giles Peterson compilations called Impressed that came out almost 20 years ago that some people know and love. He's put together this fantastic set, Journeys in Modern Jazz Britain, which gives a sample of a load of tracks from that particular era, all sorts of fabulous stuff, including people like Don Rendell and Ian Carr, as you'd expect. So that compilation has come out, and it's a double disc set, which is retailing a fairly sensible sort of 24, 25 for the double set. It's been done through Gearbox, who do analog cutting down in London, do wonderful, wonderful vinyl, and then pressed to optimal polyline sleeves. Absolutely sensational stuff. Great sleeve notes from Tony Higgins as well.
Now, normally we'd be saying goodbye at this point, but because it's a summer special, we're going to get you to hang around, because all of the guests on the show this episode are taking part in what we've called 3 fancy bits. So you're going to tell us about 3 of your fanciest bits, and we're going to talk about them and also have a look at how much they cost, or are worth, should I say. What have you got for us first?
So first up is something that takes me right back to my teenage years. As a, I don't know, slightly insular teenager, I tended to enter loads of radio competitions, and I was also a massive fan of the Manics. I think insular teenager, Manics, they probably go together quite well. One of the competitions that was around at the time was to meet the band and go to their album launch party for This Is My Truth, Tell Me Yours back in 98, and I had to go on and do some sort of weird quiz on the radio where you had to do battle. And as part of that, we got all expenses paid trip to Cardiff Castle, where we got the album playback on these massive speakers, and then James from the band was knocking around afterwards, and as part of it they gave us this very, very limited edition promo pack, which contains a CD sampler and a cassette sampler of the album. There are only 200 of them. I have number 92, and the band had signed it, and it was just one of those things where they left it in the hotel room that they put us up in for this experience, but we didn't know we were getting it, and so you get there and there's this little bag on and you open it up, and suddenly you've got this incredibly limited thing. And while I don't know exactly how desirable it is to this day, and the Manics do sign pretty much anything they ever release now in a desperate attempt to get it into the charts, as a lovely little item and a bit of memorabilia, it's something that stayed with me for a long time. Yeah,
because when you first showed me this, I thought, oh, signed, because anything signed is an absolute ball ache. I can tell you, the cheapest one on Cogs is currently £100.
Okay.
The last signed one of those sold in 2019 on PopPsych. However, it went for just £26, which seems very low. However, now you said they'll sign anything. Just to give you a little bit of contrast, though, the Suicide Alley 7-inch
yes.
signed. The last copy sold for £1,620.
And if any listeners really enjoy this little bit of the show and have a copy of that they'd like to donate, I will happily take it off their hands.
What's next, Gareth?
Next up is a singer-songwriter called Gavin Clark. Some people will know a band called Sunhouse that came out. They had an album called Crazy on the Weekend that came out in 1998 on Independiente. Just this one album. It's absolutely incredible. Totally at odds with the Britpop scene at the time. This really sort of raw vocal sound to it. It had quite a country influence to it. Beautiful, beautiful vocals. They disbanded, and Gavin Clark, by all accounts, had quite a difficult time of it. Shane Meadows made a film with him a few years back, which was released alongside various other bits and bobs. And they put together a collection of solo recordings of his called Beautiful Skeletons, which was done as a sort of double vinyl edition. They didn't make many copies of it. A few of his songs people will know because they've been used in things like This Is England. They were also using the This Is England 90 TV show, I think. Did some collaborations with a band called The Evangelist. But rather sadly, he died a few years back, and it was one of those moments where there was an immediate kind of retrospective reevaluation. And so these records that only a few of us had bothered picking up in the first place, suddenly I've got like people emailing me on Discog saying, would you be willing to sell your copy, please? Obviously not, but it's one of those where even though I know it's not a big name to anybody, it's massively cherished because that voice has been in my life for sort of 23 years, and I know that there'll never be any more from him. So yeah, a really special record to have.
Not to bring it down to just money, but however, the listeners are going to be curious here. So they do go for around a couple of £100. However, there are none available. You've got 201 people wanting it. So if I was listing that record today, I would probably be asking for 400 with offers and probably take something around 350.
Which is quite something, isn't it?
It certainly is.
But you're not having it.
You're not having it. Right, I'm not going to lie. I'm judging this next one because I know what's coming.
Yes, just to complicate things. At the turn of the millennium, David Bowie's stock was not that high. Obviously, they had the big Glastonbury set, which was repeated last year, and everybody kind of retrospectively decided that, he was at the peak of his powers, and in many ways I thought he was. But it was that time where people weren't so bothered, and Mark and Lard were doing the afternoon show on Radio 1, and they were big fans of Bowie, and he'd done interviews with them, and he'd been on the show recently for them. And as part of it, they offered a prize, and there was one of those phoning competitions where you just had to be on the phone as quickly as possible. And as a result of that, I managed to win a personally dedicated signed CD of the All Saints instrumental collection that came out as a sort of reissue around that time, which brought together some of the stuff from the sort of Berlin trilogy, as it's sort of slightly erroneously called, and some of his 90s instrumental stuff as well. The CD itself is a great collection of music, but, when you've got something with personal dedication and the man's signature on it, that is something that I will always reach for whenever people ask me if I've got anything special in the collection.
Well, these things are incredibly difficult to value, because the CD on its own, effectively, what, £7 or £8, something like that?
Yeah, not much.
Yeah, not much. But then you look at the signature. Now, when you go on PopPsych and you're looking at signed Bowie stuff and what it's gone for, the key here is, does it have provenance? So you'll see again and again and again these completed listings where it says certificate of authenticity. Yeah, they've all been knocked up in somebody's bedroom. If you buy something signed on the basis that it says COA in the listing, almost certainly you've been had.
Yeah.
However, because you have the provenance of winning it from Radio 1, etc., me and Tim just really struggling to come up with a value. So we think, looking at sold CDs, records, you look at potentially 3,000, 4,000 and 5,000. Yeah. For a CD, you're looking, we think, somewhere between 500 and 800.
Good grief! Does that require you to find a buyer that's called Gareth?
I was just going to add that. You could ask a little bit more if the buyer was called Gareth. Well, because he ain't signing anything else, and I don't think he signed a huge amount of stuff.
Yeah, so that was the thing at the time. Even then, I kind of knew that this was a relatively rare thing for him to be doing. So, yeah, sort of leapt at it and couldn't believe other people weren't leaping at it at the time. But that is, for a CD, what are the chances?
Indeed, Gareth is a lucky boy. If only it had been on vinyl.
So, Tim, we went to the indie label market, the part 2 of the indie label market. It was in Carnaby Street in Soho a couple of Sundays ago. It was a boiling hot day. We need to just put that out there, because there was some queuing involved in the sunshine and lots of shuffling backwards and forwards as stewards kept pushing us into the sunlight and we kept shuffling back.
Do you remember when I nearly got into a fight with that bloke who didn't want to move?
Yeah.
Listeners, it's quite funny when Paul and I are actually together in the flesh, interacting with, real people and their kind of various twatteries. Paul tries to stay very chill and zen-like, and I have to admit, and Paul will attest to this, I do sometimes let them upset me, don't I, Paul?
Well, you'd think it'd be the other way round, but it's not. You are the one who tends to
very sensitive,
sort of initiate confrontation. And I'm like, I've got my head in my hands, going, "Oh no, not again."
So one of these security type people told us to move back because they were about to move some trolleys down the side or something. And because we were obeying social distancing, we, being at the front of the queue, tried to move back, which meant moving back into the queue, and no other fucker was moving. So all it meant was we were trying to tread on the toes of the people directly behind us. So I, being a hero, used my loud voice to suggest, could everyone just move back a bit so that we can move back? And some man further back in the queue, who might be a listener to this pod, we don't know, patronisingly said, "Calm down," and refused to move. And Paul, I came pretty close, didn't I? I came pretty close to having a sort of Larry David moment, but I held it in, I think.
You did, just
but
about.
Honestly, listeners, Paul, your face was pretty bad. You looked in genuine anguish. You're like, oh God, what's Tim gonna do? But I didn't do anything.
Well, because now I know you have form.
Yeah, I know.
I'm always kind of... Right, should we talk about the lovely records at the fair? So we were queuing at one stand in particular, which was to see the lovely, lovely people from Mute Records. we were effectively second in the queue, so we got dibs on some really nice items. I managed to pick up test pressings from Erasure, Martin Gore, Goldfrapp, Fad Gadget, Lieback, A Certain Ratio, and many, many more, which I was absolutely thrilled about. And we will actually talk to Paul in part 2 of the summer special, Paul A. Taylor from Mute, about his experience at the event. You should listen out for that. There's some interesting details about how they operate. What did you get, Tim? What did you find anything interesting there?
I also found Mute to be by far the best stall. I think that they get what it's about, perhaps more than some of the other record labels. So they came armed with test pressings, limited edition, signed, a lot of signed stuff, special bargain prices on their back catalogue, because you've bothered to trek out to the independent label market, so you get rewarded with goodies at a good price and stickers and all kinds of bits and pieces, flexi discs. Everyone else seemed to be asking kind of RRP for their standard back catalogue of records. There was a dry cleaning cassette from 4AD, which I think was a tenner, and I think was exclusive to the indie label market, so that was good. But I have to say, if Mute hadn't been there, being so amazing and being such a treat for fans of records, I probably wouldn't have felt so disappointed by every other stall. But as it was, Mute knocked it out of the park so much and gave record fans exactly what they want, and created a real buzz. And they had the longest queue they almost had the only queue.
Yeah, pretty much.
And I do feel like other labels for next year could maybe learn from Mute.
Yeah, I mean, Catherine bought a catalogue item from 4AD. I think it was £28. I mean, you literally could have walked around the corner and bought that at retail for probably £3 less.
That's kind of what I thought.
So, yes, so other labels, come on, get your act together.
And it's not a criticism of any label in particular. I think they might turn up thinking, right, okay, so this is the standard thing. It's only, honestly, because Mute showed a different attitude to think, no, that this is about the fans and giving them a real treat today. And I don't feel like the other labels felt this is about the fans. And so it's just a small tweak in outlook, isn't it? We'll kind of, let's see next year, because obviously all the labels listen to us.
It is true, because that was quite a trek for a Sunday morning to London. We set, because there's no transport out of Bexhill for some reason on a Sunday morning at the moment. So we set off on foot at 5:30 to get to Hastings to pick up a train to take us into London. So the reward for that felt justified. If I'd done that and queued up and been offered a catalogue item at slightly above RRP, I might have been a bit annoyed.
Yeah, exactly. But overall, awesome day. It was lovely. We met some really nice people.
Yep.
It was a real brilliant day. It was my first time in London in an extremely long time. Felt a bit weird to be there.
Yeah, same.
But yeah, it was good. And thanks.
We went to the pub, met some listeners.
Yeah, I was going to say thanks to the listeners who came down too and came and said hello. It was lovely. This ends the report. And indeed, following on from that indie label market chat, one of the wonderful people that we met there was a guy called Kevin. But you listeners will probably know Kevin better as DJ Food.
Now, is it DJ Food or DJ Food?
It's DJ Food. Isn't it? Or is it DJ Food? It's DJ.
No, he's reclaimed it. It's DJ Food now.
Is it? Is it not still DJ Food?
No, we had this conversation. He's definitely DJ. It's DJ Food.
DJ Food. So Kevin, aka DJ Food, is a fantastic electronic music producer and DJ. And after the record fair, we caught up with him for a chat about his life and work. And we began by asking him to kind of give us a potted history of the project.
It started as a Food for DJs project in the early 90s, trying to make breaks and beats for DJs to cut up. And there are 5 albums of jazz breaks, which are exactly that. Come mid-90s, music had moved on, things had moved on, and people had joined the fold from Cold Cut, and myself had joined, and another guy, PC, Patrick Carpenter, had joined. And things were becoming a little more musical, a little more arranged, a bit more song-based. And so the jazz breaks were ended, and A Recipe for Disaster was the first DJ Food artist album, if you want to put it in inverted commas, mid-90s. And then Cold Cut went off to become Cold Cut again, because they'd been caught up in major label wrangles. And Patrick and myself were left to be DJ Food. So we made a ton of mixes and a ton of other albums and mix albums and stuff like that, and ending up with Kaleidoscope in 2000. And then Patrick left and moved to the Cinematic Orchestra, and so it was just me. So now it is DJ Food singular, and has been for about 20 years.
Did the concept exist before you were a member of it?
I remember buying DJ Food records. I remember buying Jazz Breaks Volume 1.
Oh, wow, okay. It is odd, isn't it?
So it's like, the fan that marries Gary Newman, that was is now his wife.
And then becomes Gary Newman.
Yeah, exactly.
Has that ever happened? You do get sort of Japanese female pop groups who, over time, like there's a band called Morning Musume.
Okay.
And they've been going for what, maybe 25, 30 years, but somehow they're still all 17 years old.
Oh, really? Oh, God.
Because none of the, the original members would be about 45 now, which is fine, but it isn't what they're about. They're about schoolgirls prancing about.
That's all Japanese pop, isn't it? To stereotype, horrendously.
It is a bit. It's good though. I do like Japanese pop. I find it saddens me that K-pop has become so popular, when I think there's really fun things happening in J-pop, but it seems to have fallen by the wayside. Anyway, Kev, if you bought the first DJ Food releases, that must mean that you're someone who digs for breaks and digs for records. So is that how young were you when you went from being someone who just buys music and records to someone who starts focusing in on digging for nuggets hidden within albums?
Well, it was pretty instantaneous from when I started to learn to DJ, which was 1985, when I was 15.
Oh, wow. Really
into hip hop, had heard Buffalo Girls, had heard Rocket, and basically wanted to learn to scratch before I wanted to learn to DJ. And so, I'd go to local car boot sales and I'd find weird Blowfly albums from the States and Incredible Steel Band albums, Heaven on Earth, things like that, James Brown Revolution live albums. I was just digging for... I didn't really know what anything was, because it was 1985.
And were they 50p?
They were. I got 10p James Brown albums, doubles. And I didn't know... But the thing is, I lived in Reigate, in Surrey, which is the middle of the sticks. And to be honest, there was no internet, there was very little stuff in magazines. So you just had to look at the covers and guess. It's no taking portables to the car boot back in 85,
I miss that. I miss when second-hand records were cheap enough that you would just take a punt, 50p, 20p, a pound, and come home with an armful. And they'd probably mostly be awful, but you might find a nugget.
Oh, I do that. I do that still. I do a thing that I call a record roulette, where I go to somewhere like the Record and Tape Exchange, and I go to the basement or any record shop, with a bargain section, and I just buy stuff based on the covers. And I think, well, if the music's great, but if not, I've got a great cover.
And how often do you strike gold?
Very rarely.
Yeah, I had a feeling you might say that. And so, are you still a keen record buyer?
Oh, I'm totally. I go in record shops every week, 2 or 3 times usually. I like looking for records. I don't have to buy anything. I have a sort of thirst for knowledge, and that extends to the cover as well, and the packaging of records. I'll buy records for the cover, and I'll buy records for the packaging, and I don't care what's inside, because I'm a graphic artist as well, graphic designer. I've always had that visual thing. So if I see a weird picture disc and I don't know what it is, and it's cheap enough, I'll buy it. If I see a weird Russian classical album that folds out like a huge poster, I'll buy it, or a Zoetrope, or a 3D cover, or something like that. I collect all sorts of stuff.
So out of interest, let's say you are somewhere where you can't get a phone signal, you can't get an internet signal, and you find something that is, say, a foreign pressing with an amazing cover, and you've no idea what it is. How much money will you go to on a blind purchase like that?
Not a lot, mate.
Like, does it level out at a £5?
It's under a tenner, definitely. Yeah, I'm not one of those guys who get the phone out in the shop. I'm just not one of those people unless there's something ridiculous Unless something looks too good to be true and the money is too good to be true. So I have to check it, but I'm, 99 times out of 100, I'm not the guy with the phone listening in the charity shop.
Paul, did you hear that?
Yes, I did.
Paul's very good at whipping out his phone, doing some research on some bit of duff that has put out £2, and Paul will show me Discogs on his phone where it says median £40, highest price £80, and he'll be like, "Yep, having that. That's on my pile."
Well, that's fair enough.
The trouble is, sometimes you're in there and you've got, if there's loads of white labels or and stuff, you just don't know what it is. Rather me take it than someone else.
It's a fine line because I think the fun is in blind buying if it's cheap enough.
Yeah, for sure.
But a white label with only a matrix number, you're going to have to either be the ultra nerd for the matrix labels, or you're going to need to use your phone.
There was a news story not that long ago about someone who could tell what a record was by studying the grooves with quite a high degree of.
Should we take that with a pinch of salt?
Yes.
Yeah, I think we probably should. So as it stands right now, Kev, how big is your collection, do you think?
I'd say it's somewhere around 10 to 11,000. I haven't actually weeded the garden, as I call it, for about 5 years now, because I moved in 2016 or 17, I can't remember now. And the time has come, the last couple of weeks I've been going through it and going, do I need any of this? What do I need here? Because I was 50 last year. And I don't know about, I can't speak for you two. There's something about turning 50, and you start to look at your possessions in a different way. And so if I pull a record out and I A, don't know what's on it in my head, I can't hear it, and I B, don't have a connection to it in any way, shape or form, I've bought it for some reason long, long ago, it goes on the pile to go out, and I listen to it and I go, do I need it anymore? Or is it sampleable? And there's the other thing about this. I bought a lot of records in the 90s to sample, and times have changed, and sampling things these days is a lot dodgier and a lot riskier, and I try not to do it as much. So a lot of the records are obsolete. I have a lot of records which are sampleable, but they're not playable in terms of, you would not put this stuff on at a club. A lot of music concrete, a lot of electronic music and things like that, which might be okay in a radio show.
Why wouldn't you play music concrete in a club? What's wrong with playing?
Well, I would on a radio show occasionally, but a lot of that stuff.
Not a fabric.
No.
Kev, let's have a little nose into your record collection. But just before we do that, do you want to reveal any of your favourite digging spots, or are you keeping them secret?
Oh, I've got to. No, I've got to, because you've got to support the shops, and I'm. What's the point of doing this stuff if you're not sharing? So. My local is Rap Records in Camberwell, which we've already spoken about.
Yeah, amazing shop.
Great guys. Cheapest record shop in London. Only used stuff. Don't have any new releases. Second local is the Book and Record Bar in West Norwood, run by Michael Johnson. Lovely guy, and we'll hear more from him later. New, mostly used. Some new. Really, really excellent selection. Very left field. Loads is psychedelic. Got biggest science fiction paperback collection in London. What else? Music and Video Exchange, because I've got to mention them because they're the church of used record shops in London. Audio Gold and Crouch End are really good. They do hi-fi hire as well as records. Discovery in Birmingham, excellent. Rare Kind in Brighton. Dig in Liverpool. King B in Chilton. I got to give a shout out to a couple that aren't there anymore as well. Because when I used to tour, I used to go to the North American states, and stuff. Discovel in Montreal, which is no longer there, was amazing. Jaime's in Minneapolis was incredible. It is still around, but it's past ownership over the years. And they've got a Discogs page as well. And Saturn Records in Oakland, which was the most incredible, weird record shop I've ever been in. Which I think as well is on Discogs, but not in the real world anymore.
That's really gladdened me. Some of those shops you mentioned, because those are also some of my favourites. And I feel like, oh, wow, that's amazing. We do like to call this little bit Beat the Dealer, but it's wherever you've managed to pick up a record for significantly less than it should have been. And I think you've got a pick for us on this one.
Well, the Book and Record Bar in West Norwood, as I mentioned earlier, Michael got an amazing collection in from a sort of ex-punk who had not only incredible collection of punk, prog rock, 70s psychedelia. He had a lot of weird electronic music, a lot of psychic TV, a lot of Cabaret Voltaire, all originals.
Oh, brilliant.
Going into hip hop and dance music. And he just had boxes and boxes in the shop. He didn't even have the racks to put it out. So, you know, I'm very lucky to know him well enough that he calls me and says, I've got a new collection and you might be into this sort of stuff. So I went over there, went through, bought a ton of stuff, well over £100. And I found this copy of Elemental 7 by Chris and Cozy, which is the soundtrack to a weird experimental film they did back in, I think, 84. You know, hasn't ever been reissued to my knowledge on vinyl. So I've been after this anyway, took it up, had a big scratch across one track. I was like, it's the album with the track on it, which has got the first ever 303 and 808 drum machine and bass line on it. So it's the proto Acid House kind of track. Although some of it sounds like Boards of Canada. Anyway, so I went up to the counter and said to Michael, look, you know, I've got this, I want this album, but it's got a scratch on it. And he looked and it's a visible scratch across one track. And he said, oh, you can just have it. So, and I was like, oh, okay, I'm not going to argue with that.
No.
I was prepared to pay significantly more than nothing for it. And maybe he didn't know what it was and what it was worth, but he didn't bother looking and he just gave it to me to his credit. And, you know, obviously I paid him for the rest of it. So how much is it worth, Paul?
Well, you did pretty well there. Well, if it didn't have a scratch, it's at least £100.
Oh, wow.
So
really?
So you did okay to get it for free, yeah. Oh yeah, for sure.
Sorry, Michael.
How does it play through the scratch?
It's okay. I mean, there's a click through one track.
Okay.
But, you know, what can you? I'm not gonna argue with that. You know, I'm not gonna quibble.
I'm quite excited by this next one, which is your holy grail item. So what is the one thing that you've just not been able to find?
I'm a big collector of ZTT records, and there's a group called ACT on there who did a single called Chance. Claudia Bruckham from Propaganda was the lead singer, with Thomas Lear doing the production. And on the day of release, the 12-inch was withdrawn by the label because it had a big ABBA sample. It's the first thing I ever added to my Discogs Wants list when I signed up. It's still there. I don't know when it was last sold. And when it comes up, it doesn't go for very cheap, let's say. And yeah, I've never seen it. I've got a copy of the 7-inch, but I don't have the 12-inch. And it's pretty much the last thing in my ZTC collection that I need.
Did they reissue it without the sample, or was that just it? They pulled it and that's it?
I think a version's come out on a compilation without the sample, but it's not all about... It's about having the original thing in the original sleeve, because I collect the artwork as well.
Correct.
You know,
yeah, of course it is.
You want the original thing, don't you?
Yeah.
Well, Kev, the last copy sold in 2017 for £361. So, with that 4-year gap in vinyl prices, I would say you've got to be looking at the best part of £500. That pretty much brings it up level with like Goodbye Horses for the like holy grail 12-inch singles, which you're never going to find.
Yeah.
Wow.
The thing is, if it came up for that money, I wouldn't be paying that money, because there's a limit, isn't there, that you're prepared to pay for something.
Yeah.
And it's not that I want a bargain, but I don't spend £350 on records. I just don't.
No, nor me. Kev, let's talk about your 3 lovely bits. You've picked some prized possessions from your collection to tell us about. And I think first up, Jane Weaver,
the Architect 12-inch test pressing. I have it here.
Oh,
Paul likes a test pressing.
Don't know anything about this record, so...
Well, it's Jane Weaver. You know, she's on Fire Records. This is a single from one of her recent albums a couple of years ago. She's married to Andy Votel, who runs Finders Keepers Records and does all their artwork. And he, I know him from a few years back. Well, actually the 90s. So, and a big fan of what he does, both artwork and label-wise, with the stuff he puts out. You know, he's a graphic artist like me. He's a DJ like me. He's a music maker like me. There's a lot of parallels. So, and I was lucky enough for him to send me that, and it's an original thing. It's got a paste-on cover, a completely different artwork from the actual release, and it's numbered 5 of 10. So, numbered special edition. So great. I don't even know if it's on Discogs, to be honest.
It is. It's there. there's several people want it, but it's never sold, and because of the personal nature of the item, I don't think it ever will sell.
Unless you get hard up, Kev.
There were plenty of other records to go before that one.
11,000, Tim. 11,000. That's more than me. What have you got next for us, Kev?
So next is the UK issue of Ralph and Florian by Kraftwerk, which had a different sleeve to the rest of the world. It's a white cover with a copper embossed circuit board and the words Ralph and Florian. And it's rumoured, but not confirmed, that Barney Bubbles designed it. He designed all the Hawkwind stuff in the 70s, Search of Space. And he went on to design Stiff Records, the masthead for NME, Injury. There's a whole book about him. He's a cult designer. It's amazing. Anyway, he didn't sign his work, so no one's been able to prove it.
Two things I want to check here is, one, I do believe you said you put this in a frame.
Yes.
Not sure we approve of that.
Don't we? Wait.
Okay, I don't approve of it.
Okay.
So the thing about the Ralph and Florian, not only is it in absolutely mint condition.
Yep.
My partner Hannah, who you've met before, bought it for me for a birthday present a couple of years ago. I think it was for my 50th actually, and I'm not going to lie, I cried when I opened it. Because it was so unexpected and it was so lovely, the thought, and I knew how much it was worth, and the fact that she'd managed to get this out of the blue, I had no idea, and so it has pride of place in my home.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Well, I can put a monetary value on how much she loves you. I think the last copy on Pop's site went for 207. The cheapest copy available at the moment in good condition is 250.
Wow. Okay, I didn't know that.
You did pretty well there. Did you not know that?
No, I didn't know.
Oh. I probably looked at the copy she bought for you when I was doing the price research.
Maybe, yeah.
If she bought it online, almost certainly I did.
I know she did some haggling with the person over the web, I think so, but she never told me how much it cost.
There's a record shop quite near us that used to be in a different sort of less good location, and when it was in a different less good location, the records were all really cheap, and he didn't bother to double check a lot of them, and just there was a lot of guesswork. And he got in he bought a collection for nothing that was like all the Kraftwerk LPs, including that embossed Ralph and Florian design.
Oh, really?
And I think he sold it to somebody for a tenner.
Oh.
And I think it was near mint. So yeah, someone got a good deal out of that, and it wasn't me, which is that's the sort of the sad part of the story, is that it wasn't me. But now I guess if he had it, he wouldn't pay any more for it, but he would sell it for a hell of a lot more. I think Paul knows who I'm talking about, but we're not a podcast that likes to badmouth people, so we'll people can write in and guess who we're talking about.
And your last pick, Kev, this is another one where there's very few copies around. Tell us about this one.
Yeah, this is a Boards of Canada CD of the Peel sessions. This is handmade by the band in an edition of 5 with unique artwork which doesn't feature on anything else. It's it's a handmade CD, and they sent it to me in, I think it was 2001, and it has an extra track called XYZ, which has since been reissued on something else, but this track was unavailable for years. But the thing about the CD is not only is it direct from them, it comes with a handwritten personal letter from them, because we did a gig together back in the late 90s and hung out a little bit, and I sent them some music because they'd sampled a jazz track on one of their first releases, and I said, "Oh, you sampled that John Abercrombie Timeless track?" And they said, "What?" And I said, "Well, it's the tiny little guitar piece at the very end of Everything You Do Is a Balloon." And they said, "Well, we just got that off of a porno. We've got no idea what you're talking about." So
Brilliant.
I got this. It's the same track. I know what it is. And so I've got 2 copies. I'll send you a copy up. And they wrote back and they're just, "Oh man, this is amazing. It's like a 10-minute long acoustic jazz track." They said, "Oh, we never had any clue what this was, but we literally took it off a porno."
Well, again, this is going to be tricky to value. So we know there are 5 copies.
Yeah.
On Discogs, 11 people claim to own it, right?
Really?
This happens all the time. I've got a record where I know I've got the only copy because I had it made, yet other people claim to have it, which is completely impossible. So, the good news for you is that 238 people want that. That's quite a lot when there is none, and there's none for sale, and it's never sold. So, with it being... having the letter, it's so difficult. I would think £400 to £500, maybe more.
Maybe
if you're a completist. I mean, if you've releases like that do tend to boil fans' piss a little bit because you can never complete your collection because that item is canon, it exists, but you will never own it.
Yeah.
So I love them and hate them at the same time as a collector.
Yeah, it's frustrating, and I've had fans over the year message me and say, you need to release this to the public and what was in the letter and all this sort of stuff. And
wow,
you can get the tracks now. I've put the artwork online so you can see it on my blog. And but I would never put the letter, and I would never, even if I sold the CD, I would never sell the letter because it's a personal thing and it's between myself and them. And that those sort of things aren't for sale.
Quite right, I think.
Right, there's something me and Tim both really want to speak to you about, and that is your record that's just been re-released with some bonus content, Kaleidoscope. How much does it cost, Kev, at retail?
It should be around £30, but if you shop around, you can get it for around 25 fairly easily.
And how many bits of vinyl are in this?
4 discs on coloured marbled vinyl in a gatefold sleeve with a page of printed matter.
It's got printed matter in it.
Yeah, it's got a music declares emergency sheet with things you can do.
Generally, Norman Records are selling this for £25. I just to reiterate that, £25 for 4 albums. That is incredible.
How much was that? Remember that New Order did, I think, a 4-album or 3-album live record a few months ago. How much was that?
$69.99, I think.
Yeah, it was something like that.
Wow.
Yeah,
that's incredible.
And they put that out themselves, remember?
Okay. Well, what was the print run? What was the pressing run of that?
For them, it must have been quite high, you would think, for New Order.
It was a slightly niche New Order release, I guess. It's not like it was the new album.
I guess.
But it,
Oh, no.
It must have been.
It would have been several thousand, surely.
I mean, I admit, when I first saw it, I checked around a lot of the independent stores because I wanted to get the pages to sort of, send links out to say, let's support your independent record stores, Resident, Norman, Rough Trade, all those people. Bleep, I think, had it for 24 at one point, right, really early on. And I messaged the label and said, look, is this right? And they said, yeah, this is right. We've sold it in to them at X amount. They just put their markup on it and it's up to them.
Brilliant.
There were some people selling it for around 30 or more, but generally it's kind of leveled out about £25-26.
Well, my copy, because this is Bexhill and new releases tend to not come out when they're due. Dell, who runs our local record shop, says mine's arriving tomorrow. So I'll let you know how much he charges because he's an absolute legend and always goes low, doesn't he?
Yeah, the prices in Music's Not Dead are brilliant.
Music's Not Dead. Is that your local, Paul?
Yes, they situated inside the Delaware Pavilion.
I'm going to go there on holiday, definitely.
So, Kev, the deluxe 4-coloured vinyl reissue of Kaleidoscope is in stores now, and available from all your favourite independent online record shops, etc. Well, question 1, are you happy with how that's been received?
It's been amazing, actually. I've had a lot of people coming out the woodwork going, amazing album, changed my life, blew my mind, all that sort of stuff. And you don't really get that sort of... Well, back in 2000, you didn't really get that sort of feedback from people. You'd read a few reviews in magazines, but it wasn't really a club record anyway. And so it's quite nice to know that it's weathered 20 years worth of, time and people are still enthusiastic about it.
It's lovely.
You've had another release not long back on Castles in Space, because I've got a copy with all the fancy handmade silver sleeves.
Oh, have you got one of those? Okay, yes.
I do have one of those.
That was the new Obsolescence, on Colin's lovely Castles in Space, with which is a collaboration with Howlround, which is another band, friends of mine, Chris and Robin, The Fog. And yes, we're playing at their festival, actually. What's it called? Levitation, I think it's called, in Whitby in November. We're doing our first ever proper live new obsolescence thing, and it's basically it's quite ambient and spacey, and it's me on turntables and them on tape loops.
Brilliant.
So it's very music concrete-y, and I'm just using the turntables as instruments and not really scratching, but making effects and crazy noises with the turntables, and they've got tape loops spinning on 4 tape machines and stuff.
And where can people find you online if they want to come and check you out and check out some of your work?
Okay, so I've got a blog at djfood.org. I'm on Instagram as Strictly Kev. I post a lot of vinyl finds and street art and stuff like that on there. I'm on Twitter as DJ Food, and I've got an Instagram under the name Open Mind Design, which is all my design work for Ninja for the last 25 years and new bits. I'm also on Mixcloud on the Mixcloud Select, which is a weekly subscription thing where I put archive mixes from Solid Steel from the last 25 years up, and you pay £3 a month and you get a mix every Friday morning.
Thank you so much, Kevin, for talking to us. And those Friday morning mixes sound rather appealing. But that's not all from DJ Food. We're going to have a little podcast sting, and then there'll be a little bit more.
Yes. Now, Tim, do you remember a while back we had Max Tundra on as a guest? Do you remember what he said, that he had this huge regret where he saw all these BBC sound effects 7-inches, could have taken them, from what I remember, but he didn't. Well, somebody knows what happens.
Over to you, Kev.
Kev, what happened?
Okay, this is what happened. My friend Robin the Fog, who I do the New Obsolescence with, the group The New Obsolescence, used to work for the BBC, and he's into sound effects, so he took them. They're in his house. There are hundreds and hundreds of them in the tracing paper sleeves with the red type across them, and I'm helping him move on Sunday. So I will no doubt be moving boxes and boxes of them, and he's even talked about getting rid of them because he doesn't know what to do with them. So maybe they could be reunited with Ben.
Yes.
Right, Max Tundra. Yeah, if you're listening.
So Ben, if you want those 7s, you know who to go to.
That would be beautiful, wouldn't it? It's a very kind of That's Life vibe that we're getting, where we can make this beautiful thing happen.
Yeah, I think it's more like the record collecting world is that small, really, isn't it?
Well, if I go by sort of podcast listenership, there's enough of us that a couple of thousand people listen to this podcast each episode. That's probably about how many there are, right? Because anyone who's really into records and collecting listens to this podcast. Therefore, I can say there's probably a couple of thousand of us out there.
It's hot, isn't it?
It's pretty hot. I'm sat here in the direct sun, not really having a great time.
Yeah, I'm sweating cobs with the door and the windows closed because I live in the town centre and buses go past all the time. That's not good for recording, and you will tell me off like there's no tomorrow if you can hear a rumble of a bus.
But if you worry about the effect of heat on your armpits, what about the effect on records? We've received a letter, haven't we, Paul?
We have, Tim?
Kent from Canada writes, "Hi, fellow old record men. How warped does a record have to be to warrant returning it? I recently purchased a record which has a pretty severe wobble on the entire outer edge, so my cartridge bounces up and down madly. It doesn't cause the song to skip on my turntable, but probably would on a cheaper system. Am I obliged to live with it because technically it doesn't affect play? Or am I justified in sending it back for another copy? I don't expect records to be perfectly flat, but I'm afraid the constant bouncing will cause the record to become worn more easily. It's a great pressing otherwise. It's the Spoon Mute reissue of Can's self-titled album. Thanks from Canada, Kent." Well, Kent, it's very funny that you should ask, because shortly after you sent that letter, a news story broke on pitchfork.com. Paul Field has the story.
Yes, as punishing dangerous heat waves have become a massive problem in the United States over the past weeks, one minor consequence is that vinyl record shipments are being warped by the extreme weather. Bada Bing Records, which released the new Cassandra Jenkins album, an overview on Phenomenal Nature, sent an email to customers noting that multiple people had received warped records. The label offered their customers two options in a bid to mitigate damaged vinyl. Right, should we see what the options are, Tim? Option 1, we can delay your shipment if you write to us and let us know you'd like to have your shipment held until the heat wave passes. Just reply to this email. When things are looking a bit cooler in your region, let us know when you're ready to receive it and we'll send your copy out.
Wow.
That actually seems
a
lot of work, but very fair.
Yeah.
The other one, it says here, 2, we send our records via media mail, which can take up to 2 weeks to arrive. Now, straight away, I don't even like sending out a Discogs order second class because I don't want it knocking around in the postal system for 3 days. I'll often just pay the extra 50p and send it out first class. Why they'd use a service that could take 2 weeks seems baffling, because the longer the postal... All right, if the price comes down, to post it, but the length of time in the postal system goes up, that may well be a false economy because the number of damaged items will increase.
Yep.
We do this since it's so much less expensive to ship.
Oh, yeah, there you go.
There we go. However, we would be happy to upgrade your shipping from standard to priority mail. This would require you to send us a bit of extra money to cover the postage. It would be up to $8 more, depending on where in the country you live.
So I guess in a way, so far, so boring. So they're either saying, look, you can wait and get it later, or you can pay us a bit more and it'll get to you quicker and hopefully will avoid warping in transit.
Yeah.
But there's worse to come in this story.
There is. Hello Merch, which is a store which works with various labels, have updated their terms of service for customers. Please be aware, we do not issue refunds or replacements for damage due to extreme weather conditions. Minor cosmetic damage, such as corner dings, bends, split inserts and so on. So if you've got a slightly warped, slightly damaged, slightly dinked, slightly split, you ain't getting no refund, fella. What do you think about that?
Is that legal?
Which ties beautifully into Kent's email.
Well, exactly.
Well, that's in the US. I don't know. Probably not here.
I don't think that sounds legal. I should say certainly not here. I don't know if any US listeners can tell us if that sounds reasonable, but we have pretty good distance selling regulations in this country. And I don't think that those kind of terms and conditions would fly. But yeah, it's funny. When we first started the shop, the tiniest wobble or warp or imperfect disc, not perfectly flat disc, caused me tremendous angst, and I agonized over whether we should even sell it or not. Since that day, and we've had more and more sort of recent releases in, or we've ordered in bits and pieces or bought collections of indie records that have come out from in the last 5 years, the number of slightly warped non-flat discs has shot through the roof. And it has just eroded my sense of how important this is. And to be honest now, if the disc, you can see the kind of cartridge dancing around slowly on top of the disc, up, down, left, right, as long as it tracks happily and plays fine, I'm afraid I now won't even really write it on the label unless it's basically, I would no longer even call that warped, because it has become so common for modern records to not really be flat, which is not a good thing, because old records seem to manage to basically be flat. We're talking 2-3%, 4% non-flatness. But modern albums, bloody hell, I don't know what's changed, but they're not flat anymore. So, when is a warp? I guess that's the kind of real question. And when is a warp bad enough that you ought to get another copy? Paul, what do you think?
I think we've touched upon this before, and I've just, I hate to say it, but I've never had a problem.
I mean,
And I know you pulled a face last time and you just don't believe me, but if I had, I would have mentioned it. Because I just haven't. I've never had a record turn up warped. I don't know. Now I've said that, of course, everything's going to turn up warped. But I've not. But there again, I don't buy many new albums. I tend to buy second-hand stuff.
I mean, to me, the word warped really suggests that there's a pretty good chance that the needle will jump, right? Or that it'll sound weird because it's so kind of bendy and weird. I guess that, do you know what we need? And maybe listeners can suggest an idea for this, and please message us on email or Twitter or whatever if you have an idea. I think there needs to be a new word.
Oh, yes. Brilliant.
For the modern condition of records tending to be a tiny bit wavy. You can see the needle move a bit.
Tiny bit.
It's not warped, is it? It's just...
wavered, fluttered.
Shit. We could just call them...
Shit
pressings, maybe.
Yeah, so the long and short of it is, Kent, we don't have an answer.
Sorry, Kent. But it was a great chat.
Tim, next up, we're joined by Joel from Brighter Day Vinyl. He was one of the first guests we ever had on the podcast, and I caught up with him to ask him to talk through some fancy bits from his collection.
I wanted to choose a Beatles EP, Iranian pressing paperback writer.
Very nice. How did you obtain that?
Oh, well, I'd love to say I was going through an Iranian village jumble sale of some kind, but no, it was eBay. It was amongst just a bunch of other singles. But I am fascinated with Middle Eastern music and have been for a number of years, and have made lots of visits to Lebanon and Palestine and many countries in that region, and I'm always trying to find records. But there's something about this Iranian pressing of the Beatles that for me just it's the story behind it. There must have been a pressing plant. The label that released it has a sort of a history of taking a few tracks from an artist in the UK from the Beat movement and making their own EPs with their own artwork. And you kind of think, where's that pressing plant now? You know, where are the people that worked for that? Where are the test pressings? You know, so that single alone is, unfortunately, it's got the cover. A lot of the ones that are currently for sale don't have the cover.
Yeah, I was going to say, I've had a look, and finding one with a cover seems to be quite some challenge, and even one that isn't above VG. So what nick's yours in?
Yeah, it's very good plus, I'd say. Ooh. It's not quite a near mint. It's the cover is a little worn, but that's acceptable.
Well, should we talk money? Because I've had a little look on Discogs to see what they're going for. Because they're all VG copies, aren't they? And most of them haven't got, the ones that have got covers aren't great. So if you've got a VG plus one, you've got to be pushing up to 400 quid maybe?
I would have said about maybe 250. But if you're offering me 400, I'll take it.
Well, the cheapest VG's at 300.
Yeah.
And the last copy I could find that sold on Pop Site was 200.
Well, I got mine part of a big old collection. I think I paid 70 quid. So I'm fortunate in that. But there's many of job lots of 7 inches I bought for 70 quid and had nothing in there. So I'm sure it's all evened itself out in the end.
What have you got for us next?
So next is going to be the Darkness acetate of the debut album. I was fortunate enough to work with the band at Atlantic Records. And was the one that approved the acetate, and so I thought, I'm going to pinch that. And the day I approved it, the band were in the office approving artwork, and I thought, well, here's an opportunity to get it signed, and I got it signed. And yeah, it's quite a unique little item, but for me, it represents my time in the music industry because I've got many acetates, many test pressings and white labels, and I could have chosen them all, but that one for me is so synonymous with my career in the music industry, so I just wanted to choose that one.
These things are virtually impossible to value, aren't they? Because acetates come up so rarely. I have had a look at signed items from the Darkness, and then tried to work out with the rarity of the item. So I've come up with a figure what I think it's worth, and then you can let me know yours. But I reckon it would be about £500. What do you think?
Now, in typical Antiques Roadshow way, I'd say, it's priceless, and I could never think of selling it. I would have thought a bit more. I would have thought,
okay.
I'm thinking a couple of thousand. I
Oh, wow.
imagine there's a few rabid Darkness fans who would like a little slice of that history.
Right, the last one. This is a lot of records.
Yeah.
I've looked it up. I gave up counting.
I think it's the second biggest ever vinyl box set ever.
Mm-hmm.
As in quantity of records actually in the box set. Not much printed matter.
And what is it?
So it's Emperor, Norwegian church burning, spiky black metal. It's their collective of all their works, all their 7 inches, records, lives, outtakes, everything, remixes. And I chose that because it's literally one of the most ones that you can actually put a figure on because it's featured in the Discogs top sellers. And also I chose it because I grew up listening to a lot of very aggressive gothic metal music growing up, and I loved it. And I think this for me represents that sort of sense of this is like a big old chunk of my teenage years. And it's a beautiful item. They took a lot of time to make it, and it's a cracker.
Yeah, I mean, we would encourage listeners to drop into Discogs and search for Emperor the Complete Works, because that, my friends, is how you do a box set.
Yeah, it's limited printed matter, and it's just vinyl. And they made 3 copies: blue, white, and black. And I got the blue one.
What did you think on price on this? This must be getting on towards a couple of grand.
Yeah, I think there's one that sold for $1,400, just over 1,000, which made I think the January Discogs top 50 list. Or it probably will be a couple of hundred more. Mine's used; it's not still boxed up. I actually listened to it. You know, there's a spine or two which are a little bit creased, so probably a near mint VG plus.
So we've gone through your lovely bits. Tell us about what's happening with Brighter Day Vinyl and the shop. And because I'm really keen, because you do a unique thing where you don't use what you would call traditional channels to sell stuff always. I know you do the WhatsApp groups and things. How does that work?
I want to find that middle ground between someone who just buys people's collections and put them on Discogs and eBay and a proper shop. So as we alluded to earlier, I used to run a shop with a friend. And then when I realised that my studies, because as well as selling records, I'm training to be a psychotherapist, were taking more and more of my time, I needed to find a middle ground. So I have a shop in my garden, and I can't really invite people over, but I've got a few cheeky friends who will come over like a couple of times to have a little flick through. But what I do is that I sell online, and I try and find inventive ways of selling online. And the way that I've fortunately been found that works best for me is WhatsApp. So I do flick through groups. So I'll get new stock, I'll price it, grade it, price it up, and then I'll film videos of me flicking through the stock. And it seems to work well because especially during lockdown, but I've been fortunate that even as lockdown has been beginning to lift, people are still liking the experience of watching videos of someone flick through records. And it serves me well. So I use that as well as the traditional methods of Discogs and occasionally eBay. And I've got a good customer base, and it's I don't want to just be that faceless going into people's houses. Oh, these aren't worth anything. You're lucky I'll give you 20 quid, and then just put them all on Discogs. It's not about that. It's the art. I try and make my shop about I think there's people who perhaps would like to run a record shop, and they follow me on socials because they get a feeling of what it's like. I'm off to see a collection. It's a crap collection, or I'm off to see a collection. Oh, there's some crackers in here. And just try and make people feel part of that experience. And that's what I try and achieve with Brighter Day.
Fantastic to catch up with you, buddy. And hopefully next time we'll see you in person.
Oh, I thoroughly look forward to it. You can come to my garden.
Joel, thank you so much for talking to us. I want to come to your garden record shop. Paul, can we plan a day trip?
Yeah, we can do a day trip.
See you soon, Joel.
Do you fancy a summer quiz, Tim?
Yes, please.
Would you like the multiple choice to make it a little bit easier?
I don't know what it is yet, do I?
It's about summer pop records.
I guess I'll take the multiple choice, thank you.
Right. Question 1, Tim. In Summertime Blues, Eddie Cochran was so troubled by being unable to take his baby on a date that he planned to take his problem to the United Nations. Which singer recontextualised that plea in a single released in February 2011? Was it Britney Spears on Hold It Against Me, or PJ Harvey on The Worlds That Maketh Murder?
Ooh. Would PJ Harvey do a summer smash record? I'm going to say Peach just because I love her. So PJ Harvey, please.
Is correct.
Yes. Brilliant, thank you.
Which of the following popular sports did the Beach Boys reminisce about playing in all summer long? Is it frisbee or miniature golf?
We'll be having fun all summer long. Ah, I should know that. I love the Beach Boys. I like that early era of Beach Boys as well. Oh no! Oh god, frisbee.
No, it's miniature golf, Tim. And you're almost saying it as well. You talked yourself out of it.
For some reason, I couldn't hear the Beach Boys singing the words miniature golf. To me, that's not... Pop songs don't have the words miniature golf in my head. That's why I went frisbee.
I know, that's why I knew you'd get that one wrong. In The Boys of Summer, Don Henley tried to capture his generation selling out in a lyrical image of a decoration on a vehicle. Which vehicle?
Oh, God.
A deadhead sticker on a Cadillac, a car phone in a Model T.
I think it's a deadhead sticker on a Cadillac.
Of course it is, Tim. Well done.
And that is a hell of a song.
I think I've heard you wanging on about this next band. The Loving Spoonfuls Summer in the City is one of the most beloved of the great 60s summer hit. What is the first car horn you hear during the instrumental bridge?
Are you joking?
Is it a Volkswagen Beetle or a Cadillac Coupe de Ville?
That is the stupidest question I think you've asked me yet. And we're at, 45 episodes of this show?
Yes.
Let's say it's an adorable beetle.
It was an adorable Beetle. Well done, Tim. Cruel Summer became Bananarama's first US hit after being featured in which popular 1984 film? Was it Splash or The Karate Kid?
Ooh. Well, Splash is more summery, isn't it? So let's say Splash.
No, it's The Karate Kid.
Bananarama were in The Karate Kid. Well, not them, but their music. That's cool. Oh, well done, girls.
Which British metal legend provided backing vocals on Queen of the Stone Age's feel-good hit of the summer? Was it Biff Byford of Saxon or Rob Halford of Judas Priest?
Well, Rob Halford is a dude, and I kind of thought him, before you even gave me the options, I thought, I hope it was Rob Halford, so I'm going to say Rob Halford.
It is Rob Halford. Well done, Timmy.
Have you seen his Instagram?
No.
If you want to be cheered up, you should go and search for Rob Halford's Instagram. I shall say no more.
In summertime, the Fresh Prince, Will Smith, as he was soon to be better known, outlined the optimum speed for cruising around Philadelphia in one's freshly waxed car. What was that speed? Was it 11 miles an hour or 2 miles an hour?
Well, as a recent car driver, I'm going to say that driving at 2 miles an hour is almost impossible. So let's say it's 11 miles an hour.
No, Tim, you should have listened to the question carefully. It was 2 miles an hour because he's cruising around, showing off and looking for the ladies.
At 2 miles an hour?
When you drive your car around with the top down and you have your top off...
Yes.
You've got your beats going...
Yes.
And you're cruising along the seafront looking for ladies.
Yes, tail, I call them.
Chasing tail, yes. You'll go past them too fast.
The tail's already been and gone.
Exactly.
I still say that 2 miles an hour is too slow. Sorry. When I'm cruising, it's just...
You could get their phone number at 2 miles an hour, Tim.
Oh, I see, that kind of speed. Like chatting speed.
Yes.
Oh, maybe. All right, okay.
Otherwise, you're just waving at strangers.
And they're like, "Who the fuck was that?" While I'm just in the distance.
Mungo Jerry's debut single "In the Summertime" has sold an estimated 30 million copies since its release in 1970. For which company was singer Ray Dorset working when he wrote the song? Was it Timex or Rolex?
To be honest, Paul, I almost think less of you for that question because that's such a trad pop pub quiz question, and I kind of feel it's beneath you, so I'm not going to answer that one.
Okay. Should I tell you the answer?
Let's say it's Rolex.
No, it's Timex.
Oh, God.
Summer Nights, number 1 in the UK for 7 weeks in 1978, was a duet between John Travolta and Olivia Newton-John in the movie Grease. How many lines in the song were delivered by other characters from the film? None or 7?
Delivered by other characters from the film.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm sure that some of them ask Sandy for more information, but is it just Olivia Newton-John doing a sort of voice for them, or is it actually them? At 7
is the right answer. You nearly talked yourself out of that one by overthinking it.
I certainly did. I am known as an overthinker.
So LFO, not the one that I would like on Warp.
Oh, yeah.
But the American pop group whose name stood for Light Funky Ones, expressed their love for summer girls in 1999. They especially like girls who wear a particular brand of clothing. But which brand? Is it Superdry, which, can I say, is what happens to every vagina if you walk into a room wearing it, or Abercrombie and Fitch?
You can't say that on a podcast.
I can't say that, no.
No, I'm keeping that in. I do like to mock my good friend Juliet, who has an extensive Superdry collection. But I feel like she's now got to the point where she is buying more Superdry stuff just to upset me. I think that it's Abercrombie and Fitch.
Of course it's Abercrombie and Fitch. Well done, Tim.
Thank you.
That's this week's quiz, Tim. Right, do you know how you did? 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 out of 10. That's pretty good. And I did make it easier for you by going 50-50.
Yeah, listeners, Paul originally wanted to give me 4 options for every bloody question, so in which case I probably would have got 0 right, so I appreciate that, Paul. Listeners, it's been another silly episode of We Buy Records, but this time you don't have to wait too long.
No, we are going to be joined in part 2 by Mr. Paul A. Taylor from Mute Records. He takes us on a sort of little bit of a dive into the industry, into how the pandemic's affected the business. We talk about their release schedule, some of the artists he's worked with, and we take a little dive into his collection where we find probably the highest valued item we've ever had on the podcast, so look out for that. Join us next time for more adventures in vinyl on We
Buy
Records.
Elsewhere on We Made This.
The X-Cast, an X-Files podcast.
One of the interesting things about Carter's work as a writer and director, and again, this is something that I consider, personally, I'm not speaking as anybody with any theological expertise, to be clear, but just something that when I see it in his work, I think this is something I associate with Catholicism and my religious faith, or the religious faith I used to have and kind of still never really kind of let go of, is Carter's preoccupation with the idea of sin, redemption, and in particular forgiveness.
Free with this month's issue.
I went for quite a few years in a row to Leeds Festival, where there seemed to be riots following us wherever we went for a few years.
Yeah, there was a riot at the one I went to, I remember.
Yeah. Well, me and Sarah, our first festival was Leeds 2000, where there was a riot in the field that we were sleeping in.
Because sleep is important and nothing is going to get in the way of my sleep. I need to clarify that.
We decided that if we didn't open the tent and look outside, we would be okay. Yeah. And then the next morning, opened the tent, and surrounding our tent were burnt tents and an entire row of toilet cubicles that had been burnt to the ground.
Wow.
So I like to think they thought, wow, if they think this is not worth leaving the tent for, we don't want to mess with these people.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
They're that committed to sleep. Let's not with them. They must be serious business.
Pick a disc.
And that was just before you trialed the phone line into the modem to get.
Oh man, how much trouble I got in downloading music and giving the family computer computer cancer, trying to go through. Because I had a very religious home, so on my MP3 player, the Black Parade, actually, I changed the titles because I wasn't allowed to really listen to rock music. So the Black Parade was like the Jesus Parade, and I changed the names and stuff. So if my mom saw me listening, I was like, there's no album art. I know exactly what the songs are.
Check out all of these shows and more on the We Made This podcast network.